Welcome to an exciting journey into the world of auctions. We will navigate the legal intricacies, explore digital innovations, delve into the economic impact, uncover hidden treasures, and ensure your confidence with consumer protection. So whether you're a seasoned pro or a curious newcomer, this is your backstage pass to the voice of auction. Well, thank you once again for joining us on this episode. Today we're having a conversation around consumer protection, and it gives me great privilege to be chatting to Mr. Phil Power and, of course, Nico Marie. How's it going, guys?
Fine, thank you for the invite.
That's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah,
the both of you play active role in the governance and the consumer protection values at SIRE. What measures do you think that SIRE has put together, to ensure that these measures are strong and, of course, straight to the point? Well, I'll start with who is the head of governance?
Who are you aiming this question at? Myself or Nico?
Yourself.
Okay. Cool. Okay. Well, thank you for that. As we've discussed before, I've been a proud board member and director of SIRE for the last 9 or 10 years. I'm very privileged and honored to have a man of Nico Marie's caliber to be on board with us, because he is not only a brilliant attorney, but he is a very fair and understanding person that makes life a lot easier for us at governance to administer what needs to be done. To answer your question, we have evolved over the years to become a formidable force to be reckoned with under SIRE, and actually the voice of the industry or the profession, whereby we have established a very, very strict code of conduct and ethics, which we all subscribe to as members of SIRE. And proudly, with the help and assistance of people on my committee like Nico, it is running pretty smoothly.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much. Nico, it feels so good to have you here. Man, we can't breathe the same air, but I can actually see you. Now, tell me how you verify the authenticity of... I'll take that again. Now, just tell me how you verify the quality of goods and services that are being sold through auction, to ensure that there is integrity and there's transparency.
Are you talking about... Okay, go ahead. Sorry, Nico.
Well, first of all, I think Philip is far too kind in his remarks, which have been sent to me. But it's a privilege to be part of SIRE, and I've also been a member of SIRE for almost 16 years.
Wow.
With regard to, I mean, one must understand the auction process when it comes to the authenticity of items being sold. The long and short of it is, when an auctioneer sells an asset, you get horse for courses. You get all kinds of different auctioneers in South Africa. You get auctioneers that are selling property. You get auctioneers selling vehicles. You get auctioneers that are selling art. And all those auctioneers are basically specialists in their own field. And if you're not a specialist, you'll get a specialist in like an appraiser or a specialist in that field to give you a value and to give you the authenticity with regard to the item that you're selling. To make sure that when you sell an item, that it is in fact an item that you can sell. But the Consumer Protection Act is very clear on this basis as well, as when, in terms of Regulation 22, no auctioneer in South Africa may sell an asset if he doesn't have a mandate which is in writing. So that mandate will give you all kinds of conditions and all kinds of instructions. One of which would be and there's also a declaration in that mandate. That declaration will state who the item belongs to and that it is in fact the seller's item. So you have a whole process. The auctioneer has a process of making sure that the item is in fact the item that you're selling.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I understand that you're someone that is a very strict and adhering citizen of the law. Tell me
I
about
try to be.
what recourse can buyers actually take when they buy an item and they come home and the item is actually doesn't match the description that has been given. What can they do about that?
Look, it's happened in the past. We don't. It's actually we have a fantastic governance committee that if there's a problem, it can always be referred to SIRE. But in the last while, we've found that in many of the instances, and this has happened to us the other day, we sold a vehicle which was a 2000. It was advertised as a 2011, and in fact, it wasn't a 2011. It was sold for argument's sake 100,000 rand. And the item was in fact a model which was older, a 2010.
Oh wow!
So what happened was it was an error, not that we had in our part. It was basically part of the papers, and it was referred back to us, and we then came to an agreement to have the price adjusted.
Yeah.
In other instances, what can happen is the buyer can bring the item back, can cancel the deal, he gets his money back, and the item is re-auctioned. If that isn't so, then you refer it to Mr. Powell and his team at SIRE. And if it's a SIRE auctioneer, member auctioneer, that's why it's also very important to send out the message. When members of the public are dealing with auctioneers, and they are dealing with auctioneers which are SIRE member auctioneers, who have to adhere to a strict code of conduct, a constitution which is very strict, and rules of auctions. All SIRE auctioneers have to act within the ambit of those laws. We also have Second-Hand Goods Act law, we've got the POPI Act, we've got the Consumer Protection Act, we've got the Property Practice Act. The list goes on and on. But if that isn't so, then the auctioneer will be brought to book. There's a whole process followed. And then once that process is followed, there can even be a disciplinary meeting convened, and that auctioneer may even be suspended or expelled out of the organization. So auctioneers, generally are doing everything in their power to make sure that they act within the four corners of the law.
Oh wow! Thank you so much. Well, that's given me a new insight into this, into the world of auction. Well, Mr. Philip, we understand that you had the governance at SIRE, and that it leads me to this question. Are there certain conditions or standardized practices that a bidder should actually meet, or a bidder, a buyer, an auctioneer should meet before they can actually sell particular goods and products?
Okay, so a bidder is a buyer and a seller is a seller. Are you referring to what guidelines the buyer needs to adopt
before
he purchases an auction? On both. Okay. Well, it's very simple. I think that Nico has articulated that in his earlier discussion, is the importance of a clearly defined mandate, which an auctioneer is bound and legally bound to obtain, whether he's selling fixed or movable assets, simply because the mandate clearly defines the terms of engagement between the parties, the commission, and the scope of work involved. In other words, in a simple nutshell, the mandate will say, you're bringing me your car. It's your car, yes. It's unencumbered, yes. It has a reserve, yes. What is the reserve? 100,000. Okay. What happens in the event that we don't reach 100,000 and we only reach 80,000? Do I have the opportunity to post-auction negotiate with the buyer to get him up, and maybe you come down? So the auctioneer becomes the fulcrum in this transaction. That is clearly defined. Also the term of the mandate, how long it's for, and also that if the auctioneer is the effective cause of the sale of that transaction, he must be protected. On the other hand, the seller needs to agree to the terms and conditions laid out in the mandate, and he has to be the legal entity, the legal person who is entitled to engage in that transaction.
Yeah.
And by his signature, it levels the playing field for buyer and seller to transact.
Yeah.
And if that is followed by the auctioneers, the member auctioneers, and the sellers understand that, then I think 90% or the majority of complaints against an auctioneer would be eliminated, because they understand there's no confusion. Oh, I thought you meant this and I thought you meant that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Put it down, write it down in writing so that you can preempt anything that takes place on an auction.
Yeah. Thank you so
Conversely,
much. Well, I'll just have to cut you short. Thank you so much for that insight. I really appreciate it. We're pressed for time, so we want to give everyone an opportunity. You know, it leads me to this question that I'm very curious to ask. I don't know if I should ask it, but I will still ask. Are there any examples of when, you know, when these sort of problems, you had the sort of problems in your institute and then you had to resolve it? Are there any examples of, you know, of problems like this that you have resolved in the past before at SIRE, Mr. Powell?
yes, we've got many circumstances. Obviously, want to protect the parties involved, because I'm very proud to say that with the assistance of people like Nico on my board, we resolve 99% of our complaints leveled against auctioneers, because most of it, as I said, misunderstanding or confusion. On the odd occasion, an auctioneer has acted indiscriminately. We've brought him to book. We've given him the opportunity to redeem himself. And in the event that he has, we've suspended him, giving him a further opportunity. And there's a whole process involved in doing that.
Yeah.
And if he's failed to do that, there are certain auctioneers that have been expelled from our institution.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Well, thank you so much for that as well. You know, you've opened my eyes into things that I really did not know or haven't heard about SIRE, with the regulations, the rules. I want to actually find out, what are the measures that you take to, you know, to educate new bidders, or whether the auctioneers themselves, on the right practices and the responsibilities that they have to ensure that they, you know, that they deliver a smooth sale. I'll start, first of all, I think I'll start with Nico on that, just to give me an insight on that.
Peter, yeah, look, SIRE has been, you know, for many years, the education department especially has been, you know, we've been doing road shows and we've been doing education on the basis that we've been sending out, you know, blogs and news articles with regard to how the auction process works. But, you know, the auction process is really not a difficult process, you know, and a lot of people might think this is it's not a difficult process, because one must remember that the onus of proof of adhering to all these rules and regulations falls squarely on the shoulders of an auctioneer. So no auctioneer in his right mind that is part of this of SIRE and an organization like SIRE will go and go outside, will not act outside the act, because it's to his own detriment. You know, and if you go look at the processes which are in place, you know, with regard to the Consumer Protection Act, it gives you from A to Z how you should advertise, how you should conduct the auction, what you are and what you aren't allowed to do. So, you know, for a consumer, and I think I've lost the golden thread there. I don't know what the question was, but the fact of the matter is that if you go and look at SIRE as an organization, we have been educating people as long as I can remember. You know, trying to explain to them the processes, how it works, where you can do, how you must be registered as a bidder if you want to bid. If you're a seller, remember the seller's also got rights that we have to look after. You've got two types of auctions that you can have. You can have an absolute auction, which means that if it sells for R1 or R1 billion, it must sell. Or you have a reserved auction. That's an election process. And the seller's rights also have, he's also a consumer and regarded as a consumer. So we as auctioneers have a balancing act to keep everyone happy and to make sure that we adhere to all the acts.
Yeah.
All the
Can
laws.
I add something to that?
All right, cool. Tell us, Mr. Philip.
Very quickly, just in concluding, for the consumer's protection, there's a thing called the rules of the auction, which every auctioneer is compelled to put up before an auction. And and what we try to do as a rule to the public is we tell them to please make sure that they are familiar, one, with the goods that they are purchasing, and two, the terms of engagement between the auctioneer and the seller. So it is important and very critical for the buyer to be well informed, and that's our drive, to inform, help the buyer know how to ask the right questions so that he's protected.
Yeah. So
Correct.
Sire does not just cater for, you know, the auctioneers as well. They actually actively cater for, you know, the buyers and ensure that they're very happy with what they get. So I believe that with what Nico and yourself has actually said, one of the most important things that I've taken out of this conversation is that you need to know the rules before you actually come to bid or before you actually bring out your goods to actually sell. Well, it's really good to have you talk about this. You know, this is one of the most important things that people are scared of, I believe, you know, during auctions. The ability to, you know that when I get this, I'll be able to, if it's not what I want, I can get a refund or I can get it back and all of that. No one wants to buy used goods, or used goods are goods that are not good anymore or something. Well, thank you so much for giving us that insight.
I just also want to add something to that, Chidi, which is very important. You must remember that the transacting of an auction, transacting of goods by way of the auction platform, is an emotive one. Number one, it can be emotive and it can be price driven. So we have an old caveat in the auction industry, caveat emptor, let the buyer beware, which basically means make sure you know what you're bidding on and you're familiar with the goods that you're bidding on, because you can't just throw it on the auctioneer to say, I didn't know that and therefore I want my money back. The Consumer Protection Act won't protect you against that, because if you have fulfilled your obligation as a buyer, knowing that you need to determine the quality of the goods or make sure that you're familiar with the item you're bidding on, then it's your onus. If you overpay, bad luck. That's not the auctioneer's fault. That's his duty.
Thank you so much, Mr. Phil. We're out of time. We hold the belief that this conversation has really been enriching today. Thank you so much for joining us. Goodbye.